This motion this evening is a typical cynical motion from Fianna Fáil. But to be fair, they're only taking up the Fine Gael's lead on it. Those parties which supported the local property tax are now running afraid of it. Of course it's due to go up. That was the whole idea when you bought it in. As property prices go up, the tax goes up. That was too much to accept before the election, so the can had to be kicked down the road. Now the great proposal is to kick it down the road again to make the next increase even steeper. The government should stand over the logic of its own tax. And Minister, I was reading through your speech there, and you say the introduction of local property tax provided an opportunity for political reform at local level. It hasn't. It hasn't done what it's supposed to do. As someone who's come from a local authority, as somebody who lives in a local authority, the local authorities are starved of finances. But not only that, the decision-making within local authorities is still centralised at central government, and indeed from a European level, but also in terms of the chief executives within the council making the decision. It certainly hasn't given more decision-making to elected representatives. So you haven't got the reform with it that you had intended to be got with it, and people still don't have. People still don't have water, people still don't have sewerage, people still don't have proper roads, and all of those things. So I think that is the most thing that's annoying people. They don't see anything for it. The local property tax was introduced at the lowest point in the property cycle, making the increases inevitable. Even if those currently excluded because they were bought in 2013, it'll only buy a little more time. There are people in deep mortgage distress paying this so-called wealth tax. For them, it's simply a tax on debt. And that's why throughout your speech as well you talk about stability and the importance of stability. But where is the stability for these people who are paying a tax on debt? I know that the calls for reform, but what did these parties think was going to happen when you linked the tax to the property? As I said, the motion is deliberately vague and is designed to give the impression that something is being done. Now, what are the ability to pay and for affordable issues? I have no idea, and I don't know, does anybody else. In its report, the Parliamentary Budget Office set out 4 choices. One was no policy change, i.e. the 2019 re-evaluation goes ahead as planned, or to freeze valuations as 2013 levels, to revalue and adjust rates nationally to maintain overall yield, and to revalue and adjust rates locally to maintain overall yield. The Thornton review supports the last option, and as Senator Norris pointed out, you can't have somebody reviewing the tax who bought it in, who designed it in the first place. Re-evalue and adjust rates locally to maintain the overall lead. Maybe this is what Fianna Fáil are getting at, but that would require some householders to pay more in order to allow others to pay less. Is that what this motion is about? If this is the case, Fianna Fáil needs to be honest about it. But for Sinn Féin there is a 5th option, and the fair option: scrap the local property tax and replace it with exchequer funding, and funding that should be got. Again, as Senator Norris said, and we have said all of the time, giving charitable status to allow vulture funds to pay a minuscule amount. Vulture funds who end up owning many of these properties when they go into distress and land and all of that. It just doesn't make sense. They're equity houses.
No, I asked the question, is not their correct title. I know that.
Yes.
I know Senator Norris.
They're vulture funds who are facilitated by this government.
Are you on any of the boards, last year? Are you?
They have made fortunes on the back of vulnerable citizens, many of them who we're talking about here who are crippled with property tax. And they have the red carpet rolled out for them. And these are the same vulture funds who refuse to come before the Joint Oireachtas Finance Committee. Why won't they do that? What do they have to hide? But we reward them. We reward them by letting them avail of these tax loopholes. It is crazy. We've included this. We have shown how the local property tax can be abolished, and you know this, Minister. We've included it in all our fully costed alternative budgets. This amounted to 445 million in the planned 2018 budget, so it can be done. We've shown how it can be done. It is, after all, a failed tax. Its supporters are trying to reform it so it's no longer what it was meant to be. The allocation process is so skewed that you cannot really call it a local tax. It's not a local tax, and now the two main parties don't want it to be a property tax. It's just another tax levied regressively, including on those who cannot afford it and those who are already struggling under mountains of debt. Sinn Féin continues to call for this tax on this debt to be abolished, and we've demonstrated, as I said, how this can be done. I would really ask you to have a rethink about this, Minister. It's often the case that the little people are taxed, people who cannot move, people who can't shift things around. You know, they cannot escape it. I would ask you to look again in this year's budget the alternatives to the property tax, and looking how the property tax can be scrapped altogether. And please don't use the excuse of local government reform. Local government are starved of funds, but this is not in any way connected to local government reform.